Great. Thanks so much, David. Welcome everyone on the line. We so appreciate you taking the time today to learn more about the North Carolina ABLE program. We appreciate the partnership that we have with David and his organization. We know it's so important that using partners, working with partners to help spread the word on this program is really going to be the key to our success and really the key to folks taking full advantage of this great benefit. So as David said, we're going to go through our presentation over the course of probably about the next hour or so, and tell you a lot about the program, its features, its benefits, and be able to answer some questions for you as well. So we will go ahead and get started here. You know, because this is a relatively new program, we've designed this presentation to be pretty specific and pretty detailed. So again, sit back and take this all in. We will have information up on the website, so you can take a look at that. But what we'll talk about today is really what is an ABLE account. You may have heard a lot about it, but not really be quite certain what it is. You do have to meet an eligibility standard, so we'll talk about what that is as well. How you can open up an account. Very importantly, how you can spend this money and what you want to spend the money on to maintain its tax benefits. There's a lot of different ways to save with ABLE, and we'll walk through some of those scenarios. One of the important features of this program is that you can continue to participate in government means-tested programs like Medicaid and Social Security, either SSI or SSDI, without endangering those benefits. So we'll talk a lot about that. Sometimes folks say, well, you know, do I have to pick between an ABLE account or a special needs trust? You do not. This is one more tool in the toolkit, so we'll talk about that. We'll also cover some of the new features in the program that were included in the tax package that was passed in Washington at the end of last year and how that affects ABLE. And that's all good news there, so that's great to know about. And we also want to touch on the Medicaid Recapture. This is not a unique feature of ABLE. There's other programs that are subject to Medicaid Recapture, but we certainly want to make sure you're aware of that when it comes to ABLE. So we'll talk about that as well. So as I mentioned, this is a relatively new program, and that may be why you're sitting there thinking, gosh, I haven't heard of this. How can that be? It's because it's still kind of new. President Obama signed it into law at the federal level back in December of 2014, and then Governor McCrory signed it into law here in the state of North Carolina in August of 2015, and it was at that point that we were able to really start getting to work, and we launched our program over a year ago now in January of 2017. So we're up and open and functioning and have been for about a year and a half. So what's the important thing, kind of the headline to know about the ABLE program, is that it's really a savings program for people with disabilities. It's as simple as that. What's important, though, is that this is a tax-advantaged program. So when you think about a college savings plan or even a health savings account, these are savings programs established by the federal government that are targeted to meet the needs of specific people in specific situations, whether you're saving for college or you're saving for future healthcare costs. Now ABLE is a third very specific savings program for people with disabilities. So it's great. It was many years in the making. It actually represents a couple of decades of work. So we are thrilled to be able to bring this to you today. So like any new tool or resource, sometimes it's kind of helpful to think through a couple of different scenarios as to when you would use it, when is it right for me, when might it be suitable. So we've presented a few of those ideas here on this page. Certainly, if you or a loved one are participating in SSI or SSDI and are subject to a resource cap, that $2,000 cap, ABLE is especially for you or your loved one. You can save up to $100,000 without affecting your benefits or jeopardizing them in any way. And if you're not in that program, you can save above and beyond that amount to a total of $450,000. New just this year for people who meet the eligibility standard and work, you can contribute above the annual cap, and we'll talk about the specifics regarding that. If you do have a special needs trust, you might still find it of benefit to have an ABLE account. We'll talk about sort of some of those pros and cons. There are two different ways to set aside money and to save money for the future. Each of them have pros and cons, and each of them are useful in specific situations, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the main thing to know is that if the individual has disability-related expenses, that is the purpose of the ABLE account, is to save for those expenses and do it in a way that's very tax-friendly. So whether you are in SSI taking advantage of a means-tested program or not, if you meet the eligibility standard, you can save for the future and be saving taxes at the same time. So that's what's pretty exciting about the NC ABLE program. So let's talk about the eligibility standard, because this is really the starting point for everyone. We've designed this graph so that as you take a look at it, you need to be able to check off one of the boxes in that first box, that first big box, as well as the second box. And so what that means to be eligible, number one, is that you have a disability and the onset of that disability, not necessarily the diagnosis, but the onset was prior to age 26. And so we've listed a couple of different items there regarding the disability. If you do have a written diagnosis from a licensed physician, that will suffice. Or if you meet the standard established by Social Security for blindness, or if you are eligible for SSI or SSDI. Any one of those three factors means you meet the eligibility standard when it comes to a disability. And then the second thing is that you had to have onset of that disability prior to your 26th birthday. You're going to hear us say it a couple times over the course of the next hour. You do not have to be in SSI or SSDI to be eligible. That's just one of the things that we present, that if you are, you most certainly are eligible for an ABLE account if you also meet that age standard. So we drill down on this just a little bit more because we know that there is a very large cohort of disabilities out there. The federal legislation did not attempt to name all disabilities, but rather left it pretty general. And we've provided the definition provided by Social Security Administration for a disability. And this is really sort of our go-to when we get calls and asking for advice around someone's disability. So we have it listed there, but it's a medically determinable physical or mental impairment with marked severe functional limitations that has lasted or is expected to last at least 12 continuous months or result in death. So again, we just provide that as sort of the ultimate determinant of what is a disability and do you indeed meet the standard. So the other important thing to know, we've talked a little bit here about eligibility, but we also hear people say, oh, so do I have to mail in my diagnosis or make a statement and get it notarized? That is not the case. We do not want anyone to send in, nor are you required to send in any certification or diagnosis. We don't want to collect personal and private medical information. This program is 100% self-certified. That's done at the point of enrollment as well as on an annual basis going forward. And if you think about this, it kind of makes sense because it's a lot like that college savings program. It's a lot like the tax returns that we all fill out every year. We're really conducting ourselves within an honor program. We're on our honor. And should the IRS want to audit you, then you definitely would want to make sure that you do have that documentation, just like if they audited you for your taxes. But other than that, we do not need any type of documentation. And in fact, the the certification is really up to you. So how do you open up an ABLE account? Well, there's a couple of ways to do that. We find that most people do like to take care of this online. You can go to nc.savewithable.com. We've provided our landing page there so that you can take a look at that. That Start Here button is the one that you would click. It takes probably about, I don't know, 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes to complete the enrollment process. Very similar to any bank account or brokerage account you might have set up. Of course, you'll want to have important information handy, name, address, social security number, things like that, that you can provide online. Or if you prefer, you can also go to the website and download and print a paper enrollment form. You can complete that and send it into the address that's provided. Either one of those two methods will work. And if you do have any questions, you can contact our call center Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. The number's listed there on the bottom of the page at 888-627-7503. And they would be happy to answer any questions that you have on the program, including any questions that you have regarding enrollment. So who can open up an account and what role do guardians play in all of this? We put together this information because there are a number of different scenarios that you might be looking at as an eligible individual looking to open up an account. The first one is where the account owner is an adult and they do not have a guardian. So of course, in that case, the individual themselves can open up the account using either of those two methods that I described. Or if they're more comfortable working with a power of attorney and they want to grant limited power of attorney to someone else to help them open up the account, they can do that as well. The second scenario is where we have an adult who has had a guardian named to help them with their financial resources and the management of those financial resources. So the type of guardianship is very important in this regard. Under North Carolina state law, you have to either be a guardian of the estate or a general guardian to handle the affairs of another person. If the eligible individual has had that type of guardianship named, then it's that guardian can indeed open up an account for them. We've listed guardian of the person and we struck it out there because that we know is a very, very common form of guardianship, but unfortunately is not the type or form of guardianship that's allowed to handle financial affairs. And so that will not do. But what I also want to point out is we had a change in our state law back in October of 2017, which allows the parent of an adult child to open and manage an ABLE account for that eligible adult child. They do not need to be a guardian if they're a parent. Just by the fact that they're a parent, they've been granted those rights to open up the account. That came about because we were out in the community and listening and learning from people interested in opening up accounts, and were made aware of the fact that oftentimes parents do not seek guardianship, but they still want to be able to help their children open up accounts. So we were able to make a change in that law, and we were very thankful to the General Assembly for working with us in that regard. The third and final case, of course, is in the case of a minor or a child. Their parent or guardian is also authorized to open up an account for them. So let's spend a little bit more time on this idea of guardianship and authorized agents, because what we know sometimes, just like with anybody else in the world, often you need a little bit of help in managing your finances, and that help might come in a couple of different forms and a couple of different levels. So we have established 4 different levels of power that can be granted to individuals other than the account owner to assist the account owner in managing their account. And I'm going to go through each of those 4 levels in the next couple of slides. So let's go ahead and do that. Level 1 is an individual who is only authorized to obtain information. So they can go online and they can look at the account, they can check balances, they can see how the money is invested, they can see how much money has been moved over to the checking account feature, but they cannot take any action. They cannot take any money out, and they cannot move any money around. They're just sort of another set of eyes and ears to help the account owner in the management of the account. Level 2 is an individual who not only has that read-only access, if you will, but they can move money around. So where this might be helpful is, let's say there's an individual with maybe $5,000 in their ABLE account. They want to set some aside for long-term savings. Maybe there's a wheelchair or another assistive technology they're interested in purchasing, but they're also trying to meet some of their day-to-day bills. Let's say it's rent and maybe some prescriptions that they need to pay for. So they want to keep some cash in that checking account component of their ABLE account. This individual with a level 2 authority can not only monitor, but might say, hey, you know what? July 1st is right around the corner. Let's make sure we've moved some money into that checking account so that when the account owner writes that rent check, we know that those funds are covered and there won't be any problem. So they can't take any money out, but they can move it within the ABLE account. Level 3 is a person who can not only move the money, but can also withdraw the money. So again, this is another higher level of authority, someone intended to work with the account owner and help them in the management of this account. But it's sort of that same scenario as I was discussing. Let's say, you know, rent's coming due. This individual would be able to not only make sure there's enough money in that checking account, but actually withdraw funds to make payment for the rent or other qualified expenses. And then the fourth and final level is a fully delegated level of authority. So this individual can do anything the account owner can do. They have full access. They can certainly see the account. They can move money around in the account. They can withdraw money from the account. And they can even do things like name beneficiaries. So clearly this is something that is determined when you enroll in the program. The account owner or anyone working with them will be given the option to select an authorized agent. You're not required to do that, but if you think that would be helpful, you certainly can. And then you can also parse out these different levels of authorization, depending on your specific situation, what you need, what would be helpful. Of course, just like any other financial account, you want to make certain that the person that you are giving access to is someone that you know and you trust and they're working on your behalf, and you're comfortable giving them that level of authority. So once the account's open and that enrollment process has been dealt with, you're also going to want to think about, well, where's my money going? And as I've mentioned, there's a couple of different options here. One is a checking account with a debit card feature. The second general option is to invest in the financial markets through a portfolio of stocks and bonds. And so those are some of the decisions to be made. And let's look at the next slide where we'll talk about the checking account feature. So this checking account is offered by Fifth Third Bank. They are a bank out of Cincinnati, Ohio. They do operate here in the States, so you may have seen some of their branches. They most definitely have ATMs as well. Really nationwide, there's over 53,000 ATMs that can be used by ABLE account holders. Like any checking account, your funds in that account are insured by the FDIC up to $250,000. The account does bear interest, granted, like all interest rates, pretty low right now, but there is some interest. You get a debit card with no card issuance fees. And of course, you do get a checkbook as well, so you can write checks if you'd like to. There's no monthly fee for using this service if you meet a couple of criteria. The first is if your average balance maintained in the account is greater than $250, or if you elect to receive your statements electronically, then there's no additional fee for this checking account. There's also no overdraft fees. So it's a pretty nice feature to have. The second thing to think about, and really what this kind of plays to, is how you might be using this money. So just like a college savings account, we know that oftentimes the account owner may not need to draw down these funds for quite a while. They might be saving for a home, they might be saving for transportation, they might be saving for education, or they might be saving for their rent that might be due in a couple of months. So based on what you're trying to achieve and what your investment goals are and what your risk tolerance is, we've provided 6 different model portfolios, all the way from conservative, that has a very large allocation to cash, that's 60% in cash, 30% in bonds, and 10% in stocks, all the way up to a very aggressive, which is 90% in stocks and 10% in bonds. Like any brokerage account out there, these funds are invested in the financial markets. They can go up, they can go down, they can most certainly lose value. They're not insured and they're not guaranteed. But they are a nice feature and certainly a nice way, if you are trying to save for the long term, to really grow your assets in a tax advantaged way. So what we'd like to do is present a couple of different scenarios. We have 3 of them in total. And by walking through these examples, we want to try to help the folks out there think about the different ways these accounts can be used and applied, and how they may or may not fit your specific circumstance. So our first case story is with Betsy. She's 10 years old. She does have an intellectual disability. She may live independently someday when she's a little bit older. She's not receiving SSI or Medicaid. Her parents are very interested in her learning some financial literacy fundamentals, including saving for the future, just as they want her siblings to learn those lessons as well. They're trying to save for her future when they know that she will not be living with them and will have other more significant expenses. And she does have a special needs trust as well. They know, however, that there's some limitations to that special needs trust, including that the funds held in trust cannot be used for housing expenses. So what they visualize someday is that Betsy might want to purchase some technology or transportation to assist her, or pay for college. And all those things can be covered by an ABLE account. So they're putting away some money now, very much to be used in the future for her benefit. Our second NC ABLE account holder is Jordan. He is an adult. He does have a guardian who works with him, who is a guardian of the person. He has an intellectual disability, but does live in an assisted living situation and in a group environment. He takes advantage of some vocational supports and has expenses that are related to those supports. He does receive SSI income and he has a part-time job. So an ABLE account has been really nice for him as a way to start saving additional dollars so that he has more than just the $2,000 cap that he's been living with for a very long time now. He's earning money with his part-time job. He can have a payroll deduction and direct deposit into his ABLE account. And we know that he wants to save for some a specific type of hearing aid that's not covered by Medicaid, but he feels would be very helpful to him and really improve his quality of life. Our third case study is Cameron. He is 28 years old. He has a physical disability. He does participate in SSI and receives Medicaid. Right now, he's going to school and has a part-time job. His goal is to save for a home that he can own on his own, and he also wants to save for his retirement. Even though he is employed, his employer does not offer a pension or a 401k plan, and so he can save above and beyond the $15,000 cap established today, up to $27,000, as a matter of fact, by contributing his earned income into the plan. So let's talk a little bit more about how you do contribute funds and how much you can contribute to these accounts. Part of the fact that this is governed by a federal law makes many of the features common across the different state plans. And this is one of them. You'll find this to be true no matter which state you go to, that right now there's a cap of $15,000 per year that can be contributed to an ABLE account. This is from one source or from many sources. The total sum of what can be contributed is $15,000. There is a very important, what we call the hands-off rule, that requires contributions to be made via direct deposit by any third parties. So let's talk about gifting, for instance. So without an ABLE account, if your grandmother wanted to give you $50 for your birthday, if that went into your checking account, that would be counted against that $2,000 cap. With an ABLE account, your grandmother can now make a direct deposit into your ABLE account, bypassing your checking account, and not have that contribution or gift counted against you or counted towards that $2,000 cap. We do have a unique feature within the North Carolina ABLE program called UGift, which makes this very easy for folks. As a matter of fact, if there's a birthday or a graduation coming up or a holiday, you can use this UGift feature to send out an email, alert family and friends to this fact, and people can very easily kind of click on that link and make a contribution directly to your account, help you build up assets and not interfere with the programs that you might be participating in. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today, which is part of a new aspect of this plan, is rollovers from 529 college savings plans. So this feature is new for 2018. It was included in the December 2017 tax package passed by the federal government, the General Assembly there, that permits this type of a rollover in a tax-free way. So one of the things that we know is that sometimes a parent or a grandparent might open up a 529 college savings plan even before a child is born. And then it may be that a disability surfaces, there might be a diagnosis that's received by the time the child is, 5, 8, 9, 10 years old, what have you. And it may be that recognize that this child will not be attending traditional college. And so then, often you're sort of stuck with this money in a 529 plan and facing a significant tax burden if you want to take the money out. Now with this change in the law, you can roll that over directly to an ABLE account. It does count towards that annual $15,000 limit. So anything greater than $15,000 will be considered as income. You can, of course, if you have an amount greater than $15,000, stage this over the course of a couple of years. But now you can make that transfer and it'll have no tax impact to the family or the account owner. This provision became effective in December of last year, and there is a sunset on it, so it will expire in December of 2025. A second new feature to the program that was also passed at the end of last year is the income to work or able to work provision. I touched on this briefly in the prior slide. This allows any account owner that is working to contribute up to $12,060, which happens to be the federal poverty limit for a one-person household, and still participate in the program. So now these individuals can save as much as $27,000 on an annual basis. There's a couple of provisions to be aware of that you do need to meet. One of them is that the account owner or the beneficiary cannot be making or receiving a contribution to a defined contribution retirement plan, such as a 401k. They also have the benefit in that the federal tax savers credit applies to them for able contributions up to $2,000 per account. Again, there's provisions here. The individual has to be at least 18 years old and not a full-time student, and they also cannot be considered a dependent on someone else's account. So what's really nice about this is it's going to the very heart and spirit of ABLE overall, which is we want to foster financial independence. We want to foster financial literacy. We want to foster folks working and contributing to society and not feeling like they're being penalized for doing that. And the ABLE account certainly supports that, and this new provision does as well. This does have a sunset on it, so it will go away in December of 2025. So let's talk about how you spend this money. Now that you've opened the account, you've put some money in, and you've saved for a while. To maintain the tax benefits of the ABLE program, the dollars that come out and are spent need to be spent on what's called a qualified disability expense, or a QDE for shorthand. So what are these expenses? Well, they're pretty broad. That's the really good news. They cover things that are considered everyday expenses and basic expenses that are related to living with a disability. So certainly things like health and prevention and wellness expenses, but it also covers things like your education and your housing expense, whether that's a mortgage or rent, transportation, whether that's purchasing a car or a railroad pass or a bus pass, anything to do with obtaining employment or employment training and support, certainly assistive technologies, legal fees, and most importantly, funeral and burial expenses. We've talked to a number of folks that have really liked this feature, that have said, hey, either the account owner with a disability or a loved one with a disability has not been able to purchase life insurance. Many times a disability is considered a pre-existing condition, and so they are barred from purchasing life insurance. ABLE could really help in this regard and help cover some of those final expenses. It's important to know that distributions for qualified disability expenses are not considered income for a benefit program like SSI or SSDI. That's also a very common question that we receive here. Is there the case that if I take this out for a QDE, that'll count as income against me? That's not true. It will not count as income. You're free to take that money out. You can spend it on the QDE. And even if you need the money and it's not a qualified disability expense, it's important to know that you can always get your hands back on your money. It will trigger a tax, and there may be a penalty associated with it. So you need to know what you're doing. You need to think about if it's worth that or not. But sometimes folks get a little bit concerned of, hey, where's my money going, and will I be able to get it back? So you do need to know all of these features because it's important. So how do I actually take that money out? Now I know how I want to spend it. Well, like any checking account or brokerage account, there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can certainly set up an electronic fund transfer. That's easy to do. You could write a check. You can use your debit card at different retailers, or you can go to an ATM and make a withdrawal. So like everything in life, there are some fees associated with this. The good news is that there are only 3 fees or 3 types of fees, and they are listed here. So there's no other fees, there's no hidden charges. Once you know this, you know everything there is to know about the fees on this program. The first type of fee is the annual account maintenance fee. This is a flat fee of $45. So it does not go up or go down depending on how much you have in the account. It's just always $45. But it's important to know that if you need paper statements, then it is a $60 charge. If you're happy waiving that and receiving electronic statements, you can get that fee down to $45. So where does that money go? Well, $40 goes to our program manager, which is a census, and they're just outside of Boston. And $5 of that goes to the North Carolina Department of State Treasurer here in the NC ABLE program that helps us cover some of our administrative expenses. The second type of account, or rather the second type of charge, is associated with that checking account. As I mentioned, that's with Fifth Third Bank. They charge $2 per month, but again, that can be waived if you maintain an average daily balance of $250 or more, or if you elect to receive an electronic statement instead of a paper statement. And then the third and final type of fee is an asset-based fee for the investment options within the program. This ranges from 34 basis points to 37 basis points, depending on how you decide to invest the money. I will tell you that in those investment options, from conservative to aggressive, we have very deliberately chosen index funds, also known as passive funds, to keep those fees down. Our providers include names like Vanguard and Charles Schwab, very much institutional household names that provide high quality index products that also allow you to keep your fee down. If you want to convert that 34 to 37 basis points into dollars, that represents $3.40 to $3.70 for every $1,000 that you have in the account. So very, very low fee on an annual basis. So let's talk about this Medicaid recapture provision. Again, this is important to know about, and it is an important feature when deciding whether an ABLE account is right for you, or possibly a special needs trust. So the way this works is that upon the death of the account owner, the state of North Carolina is permitted under federal law to make a claim against your account. And that claim can be equal to the total medical assistance that has been provided under the state's Medicaid program. But it's for a very specific period of time. And the period of time is the point in which you open the account up until that date of death. No more, no less. That's the amount that can be repaid. But it does have to kind of get in line behind a couple of other things that are paid first. And the first thing that's paid when the account owner passes away are any outstanding qualified disability expenses. The second thing are those funeral and burial expenses that I mentioned earlier. And then the third, and this is a little less common, but in the instance where the individual has paid premiums to Medicaid, those would be deducted from the amount that would ultimately be repaid to Medicaid. Any remaining funds after this Medicaid recapture provision would be paid out to the account owner's beneficiary. So let's talk about designating a beneficiary. Again, this is something that is done when you enroll in the account. If you change your mind, if things change in your life, you can always change your beneficiary, but it's important to have one on file with the account so that we know what to do in the event of the death of the account owner. So there's a couple different ways to do this. There's a very specific provision in the ABLE federal statute that says if the account owner has a family member, and specifically a sibling, who also qualifies for an ABLE account on their own. So again, if we go back to that eligibility standard, it's a disability that has surfaced prior to their 26th birthday, then that person, as a family member and as a sibling, can be named as a beneficiary, and this will be a non-taxable transfer at the time of the original account owner's death. If that person does not exist, or if that's not who you want to name as your beneficiary, then the account owner is free to name anyone else that they would like to. But it is important to know that this transfer of assets will be treated as a non-qualified withdrawal, so it will be subject to income taxes. That is at the tax rate of the original account owner, but it will not be subject to any additional penalties. So those are the two options and the two ways to go when naming a beneficiary. And of course, you can change that at any time, but it is important to name a beneficiary when you enroll in the program. So I'm going to wrap up here. Again, we will have some time for any questions that you might have. We want to leave you with this slide so you can find out more about the program, and certainly if you have any additional questions that we don't address, you'll be able to follow up with this. Our website is a great place to go to learn more about the program as well as to enroll. That's nc.savewithable.com. Or that number for our call center. Again, it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and they're available at 888-627-7503. And then it's important to know that we are active in social media, both with Twitter and with Facebook. And as we see updates or have information to share, that is where we will post those news items. When we saw the changes in the federal law, we went out immediately to social media to make sure that everyone was aware of that. And of course, you can comment and share information as well. So if you haven't yet followed us on one of those social media platforms, we would encourage you to do that. And that way you can stay posted and current.